President Biden's 2024 re-election bid is already going off the rails. And sadly, we're not just talking about a group of school kids confusing Joe with some simple questions. Biden racking up the lowest poll numbers of his presidency. Only 37% of Americans approve of the job that he's doing. And that assumes Biden is actually doing his job. Turns out he only works part-time as president. Most of Biden's public events happen between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., which amounts to a 30-hour work week. Meanwhile, his screw-up son, Hunter, can't seem to get out of the headlines. This week, the first son's attorneys met with DOJ prosecutors to discuss resolving their criminal investigation. Hunter's also got some child support problems. He's being forced to appear in person in court next week after claiming poverty relating to his 4-year-old daughter. It is the case involving the grandchild that President Biden refuses to acknowledge.
I have 6 grandchildren, and I'm crazy about them. I speak to them every single day. Not a joke.
Hunter's out-of-wedlock daughter makes it 7. But the media would rather mock Hunter's scandals as some right-wing obsession. Take a listen to this.
But I was watching another network the other day, Mika and I were, and they're saying, oh, Joe Biden, he's so disconnected from America. He's so horrible. He's so this. He's so that. And they go to one of the guests and they say, well, why is he so bad? Hunter Biden's laptop. And I'm sitting here thinking, are you kidding me? I mean, okay, if there's something on there, send him to jail.
But that it were that easy. Will, I'll start with you. The president now is 37%, lowest approval rating, after he announces for president. And the amazing thing is, this year, although he says he works between 10 and 4, this year he only had 4 events before 10 a.m., and he only had 12 so far. We're almost 5 months into the year, and after 6 p.m. And for 3 months, he had no weekend events. Does he really want the job?
I was going to say, Judge, what a case for re-election. 4 more years. If I might, that Morning Joe clip is absolutely remarkable. At least there's an acknowledgement that Hunter Biden exists. And Morning Joe would like to absolve itself for not covering Hunter Biden through 2020. But what they're willing to admit at this point is something that the DOJ as well is willing to admit, which is only half the truth, that Hunter Biden is somehow involved in some kind of tax scandal, that there's some admission that the laptop might be real. We're getting there. Let's get to the truth, why there is an obsession over Hunter Biden's laptop and why it impugns Joe Biden. Because this is a story about corruption. This is a story about potential corruption among the Biden family that goes all the way to the top, potentially, of President Biden. If Joe Scarborough is interested in the truth and understanding why we talk about this, look into that on the laptop.
All right, with Jillian, I'll go with where Will just went. I mean, the truth is that it wasn't just about the laptop. Where we are now is we have a whistleblower who's saying that a senior person in the IRS who's saying, I want whistleblower protection because I can prove, not because I have a political agenda, but with documents, emails, et cetera, that this case is not being handled the way other cases are being handled in the IRS, meaning Hunter Biden. And we also now know that more Biden family members are benefiting from the millions that are coming from overseas.
I think the thing that we always have to point out is that the Hunter Biden story is not really about Hunter Biden in the sense of the national news media. The only reason this is a topic at this table, the only reason reporters cover this, some reporters, the only reason any Americans care about it at all is in so much as it relates to his dad. And that's what's being teased out right now by Republicans who are investigating this, by the multiple lawsuits that are going on. I will say this about the president's schedule. Having worked at the White House for 4 years, I've seen the job up close and personal. From a stamina perspective, it's probably the hardest job on earth. You can try and make it easier for people. You can try and cut events, cut international travel, and manage it. But at the end of the day, there is no way to make this an easy job. Whatever the public event schedule is, I think you said 10 10 to 4, is that
Yes,
right?
that's what he
about
says.
a fifth, probably, of the president's schedule on a weekly basis. Most of what he does is not seen. Most of what he does is being in meetings in the Situation Room, doing briefings, phone calls. So I don't know what the White House's plan for him is, but it is a real challenge for anybody to do that job. I cannot imagine how difficult it would be to do it in your 80s, but that's something they'll have to figure out. I mean, I would struggle to do it. I'm less than half the president's age. I'm not even 60 yet. I'm just shy of
It's her big
60.
birthday
I
next
could
year.
barely get. I'm the first to tell you I couldn't do it.
You know, Joe Scarborough has basically said, Greg, that, you know, we looked at this in 2020. I mean, you know, as if we have absolved him of any criminal responsibility, liability, civil problems, and they don't even recognize what has happened since then, which, you know, was the walls closing in on Joe and not so much Hunter.
Yeah, I would like to paraphrase what the Democrats used to say: no child should be left behind unless it's a stripper baby. Then all bets are off. By the way, happy National Creamsicle Day.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would have dressed up too. But at least you can eat the sorbet, and if it spills on you, no one will notice.
will know.
There you go. There you go. At least our obsessions are about real things, right? When Morning Joe was obsessed about Russian collusion, it never materialized because it didn't exist. By the way, I commend him on talking. You didn't even see Mika's lips move. Incredible. And it was their obsession that gave Trump billions of free media, free political advertising. They elected the guy out of their obsession with ratings. So don't the reason why they say obsession is because they're trying to marginalize the truth. Like you said, the story's not about Hunter, it's about the cover-up and how it benefits the big guy. In the old days, journalists would proudly obsess over stories, right? A story like that, they would dive right in. They'd live it. They'd breathe it. I mean, Watergate is nothing compared to this laptop, let's be honest. So a story like this would be huge. Now, if you're interested in a story, you're obsessed, like there's something wrong with you. Now, I want to talk about his schedule. Given the state of this country, which is a pretty bad state, the news that the president works a few hours a day should trigger one thought and one thought only. God help us if he worked more. Right? Let's get him
I
down.
thought you were going to say envy.
No, let's get him down to 5 hours. Let's get him down to 4. But the problem here is if he's not working, it's clear others are. And he admitted that. He said, when I became president, I thought I'd be giving orders. Now I just take them. We were postulating that all along, that he's just a puppet. So the only orders he gets these days are take a nap and don't soil the carpet. We'll handle everything else. That's why you're seeing all this far left stuff coming from a guy who's basically kind of a reactionary person about crime, is now just completely befuddled. He's Elmer Fudd without the charm.
You know,
At least he wears pants.
That's a good point.
Yes.
It's a very good
Does
point.
Elmer
He
Fudd
saves
not
us. But you know, Jessica, they basically say that the left about Hunter, you know, that we're obsessed with him. And we talked about how it's really about Joe. But you've got Claire McCaskill now. She's a former senator, correct?
Yeah, from Missouri.
She's saying that, you know, this is just about family dysfunction, all of this. And it's nothing serious and she goes into whataboutism. And it's as though they just feel that, you know, this is like every other family in the United States. There's always one person with a problem.
Well, I think it's correct that most families have someone who is an addict in their families, but obviously the Bidens are an exceptional family. They're exceptional for what they've achieved. They're exceptional for what they're worth. And the guy's the president of the United States of America. There are other powerful families that have a lot of family turmoil and where kids are trading on their father's names. And that's very, very common. And I don't, you know, to the whataboutism front, I'm sure that Claire McCaskill, when she was talking about that, mentioned the Trumps and things that the Trump kids have gotten because their last name is Trump. I don't want to minimize what the connection to Joe Biden from Hunter might be until we know exactly, until everything is out there. But the Republicans are doing themselves no favors. And I think that's what the Morning Joe crew is reacting to by going on TV incessantly and talking about it. Put your head down and do the work. I'll bring up the interview again, Jim Comer on with the Fox and Friends host a couple weeks ago, talking about everything that they've got. And finally, I think it was Brian said, well, what do you got? And it was then a ton of whataboutism from, well, this could lead to this, and if this, and if that. The time has come to move past if you want to lead news cycles with this. If you want to go about and do your job in private and not go on national TV all the time and boast about what you have when you definitively have nothing at this moment to connect Hunter Biden's business dealings to his father personally profiting.
But would you not agree that Hunter Biden and his father have gone together and done various things together? It's not as though Hunter Biden is doing something separately. And as it relates to the Trump children, they're all in business. This guy got thrown out of the military because he was a drug addict. So what business he's conducting in the rest of the world, he's not doing it based on his expertise and energy.
Well,
so, but the question really is, if the Department of Justice takes 5 years of a grand jury investigation and can't come up with an answer as to what they're going to do, the Republicans have no choice but to put it out in public, because DOJ, even the whistleblower wants to say it, is not doing what they're supposed to do.
I think the whistleblower should get whatever protections they need to be able to come forward. I am not one of those partisans that says if you draw a straight line from what Hunter Biden was doing to his dad and he's the big guy and he got 10% and that's in a bank account that I can see, that I would say that he doesn't deserve to be president and that we were all taken for a big ethical ride. But at this moment in time, we don't have any evidence of that.
But just to put a ribbon on this, it shouldn't be the sole responsibility of the Republicans to investigate the truth. To Greg's point, there was once a period in time when the media thought it was their job to expose the truth and not dismiss a potential scandal as an obsession.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.